So, welcome to Ellected, a podcast for women in Canada and our active accomplices, as I like to say. So, I'm your host, Sarah Elder Chaminara. And today I have a very special guest. And by very special, I think the most special guest that I've ever had the privilege of talking to. So, Governor General Mary Simon is here with me right now on Person's Day today.
Yes.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
for
you.
inviting me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sitting down with me. Maybe I should ask, do you do many podcasts?
Not really. No, I've done a few,
Yeah.
but not too much.
Yeah.
But they're interesting. I listen to a lot.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Do you have a favorite?
No, I just listen to
You
a
dabble?
variety. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I think podcasts are a universally loved experience. So it's nice to know that you have that as well. Yeah.
Yes.
So we were both just at an event which you presided over and handing out really meaningful, I think, commemoration awards to individuals from across the country in honor of Person's Day. What does Person's Day mean to you?
It means that in our lifetime, we're able to enjoy the things they fought for: equality, for being able to vote, and being able to sit in a bus as a woman, or those things that in the early, I guess, 20s, these issues were not really talked about that much. But I remember growing up, and I'm from the Indigenous community, and that was even later than the rest of women in Canada, or maybe minorities and racialized women were in a category too. But I remember discussions about why women should be part of the development of our country. And as I grew up and as became a young adult, then I realized what it was they were talking about, because I started to experience it. And when I was when I was quite young, I was 28 years old, and I ran for election in a non-profit organization, a political one that ultimately negotiated the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement. And I was elected on the board. And really, I was the only woman in that room many times over the several years. And it made me realize that the famous five and what they fought for was really important, because I started to speak up and didn't accept it as it was.
Yeah. And I think for me, at least in the context of, celebrating today, it's with a caveat, right? A note, because, what they fought for wasn't exactly to enfranchise all women in Canada. It wasn't until 1960 that Indigenous women in Canada also had the right to vote.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to hold space for today, but also acknowledge that it was exclusive in a lot of ways. And that work carried on by many others.
But it also perhaps it helped open the doors
to
100% to the evolution of those.
Someone had to start, right? Someone had to start the work.
Yes.
100%. I completely agree. So the awards that you gave out today. So I think that you are particularly interested in encouraging a more and seeing diverse Canadians be honorees. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, in all our honor system at Rideau Hall, we've started to explore different ways of being more inclusive. And I think that goes for many organizations across the country, because I think one of the things that I've been really supporting within my work is to get people together to talk about the issues that they care for. Not necessarily just the today issues, but the issues that are more like deeper, like things that aren't happening.
Or have led us to where we are now.
Or have led us to where we are now. And for me, bringing people together and being able to convene Canadians together, I have this great opportunity to hear their stories. Like, I think what's really important is to hear each other's stories. That's what and we always talk about reconciliation in a broad context, but it's really about people getting to know each other, people giving space to different cultures and languages across this country, our huge country, and to be able to bring those issues to the table without feeling that you shouldn't be doing this, because everybody has a right to express their own concerns, and they explore their ideas. Like, this is also a forum for ideas where we can keep moving forward on women's issues. Like I said, we still have a lot of work to do.
Well,
there's no shortage of areas that we haven't reached the level of work that is needed in so many areas. So I think people coming together, people exploring ideas together, and coming to some agreement that this is really important for us as Canadians, as a country. So let's just keep going
to create a more fair and equitable society. Some of the issues, I made notes when you were speaking. You mentioned the gender wage gap, gaps in representation in politics, business, and science from a gender aspect. The many gains that are still being fought for Indigenous women, barriers for immigrant and racialized women in terms of accreditation, and and all, so that that we can all be as equal.
Yes.
So in the idea that we won't fulfill what it truly means to be equal until we are all equal.
So let's just take the first issue that you mentioned is women's rights to wages, equality, equal wages. There are a lot of women that are underpaid because of their women. They may have the same qualifications, and they may be working twice as hard as other people in an organization or an office, and they have to prove themselves time and time again that they can do this. So that the wage inequality is still there. It's getting better.
Well, there's been movement in the public sector,
yes, in
pay equity, but not in the private sector.
No.
And I had a chance to speak with Minister Ian recently, and I said, that's something that I would love to actually see is pay equity legislation for the private sector as well. Because the business sector isn't always necessarily willing to do it. Even it just makes sense, right? What sometimes people come that I speak to ask, like, what does it mean to be paid like a white man? And my response is kind of, how can you tell me that you would think about any woman or girl in your life and you would be willing to accept them making, more than 20 cents less on the dollar? Just say simply based, I would love to hear you tell me why you think that would be okay. Right. And it's just simply not in 2024. It should have been acceptable for any time.
No. And it also depends on, like, for Indigenous women,
yes, it's even greater.
It's even greater. But it's definitely an area that requires much more equality. The other part of this is the role of women in public service, and how they are being impacted by social media. And women are actually backing away from these very important jobs that they have, or women think twice about entering political life or public service because of what's going on. And that all those are together, like the wage equality issue, the impact on women in terms of social media, having daycare available to single mothers, for instance, that have to work, that need to work to support their families. There are some in different organized, like universities have some daycare facilities, but generally speaking, daycare services lack terribly across the country.
Yeah.
People are always asking for more support in this area.
In rural and remote areas. Things that, issues that large urban centers have are only multiplied when you start heading out. And to your point, we have an extremely large country. Even, for example, I spent a brief amount of time when I first came to Alberta in Fort McMurray. I know that it was even within the last year or so that they just opened their first 24/7 childcare facility to meet the needs of the workforce there because of the oil sands operations. And that's not something that they just, it's not a 9 to 5 thing. It's constant, right? And so having that, the moms and the dads that work in there and, well, that might seem strange or offensive even to some people. That's the nature of the job and the economy. And so being adaptable and responsive to different communities' needs is really important.
And then you get into the remote communities where daycare workers are always women.
Yes.
And
how undervalued and underpaid they are.
They're undervalued, and also they make minimum wage, which you can't survive. I have relatives that are in that position up in the Arctic, like they just, that opportunity is never there for training. Let's say they get more training so they can do other things besides looking after the children, which is the ultimate thing you have to do. But like in other ways, supporting the daycare systems, I think is really important.
Well, I'm a mother myself. I have 2 boys who are 5 and 7. And I think about it in the way that, we pay people really well to be engineers, right? And doctors and all of these kinds of really important jobs. And I actually think that childcare providers are in that same kind of level of doctors and lawyers and the people who kind of garner the most respect in our society based on the degree or the title that they have. But it's actually childcare workers when you think about it. We hand over our most precious little people, and other people to take care of them. Like, to me, there's nothing more important.
No.
So how we treat them and how we pay them, the respect that we give them is incredibly important. But I also want to just maybe touch on, I know our time together today is short, so I want to touch on something that you've already touched on, which is the online sphere and how that impacts women in the political realm and those that are considering entering into public service. I know, for example, you turned off commenting on your social media because of online abuse that you received. That there's a reason I used to have a phone in the store, and I no longer have a phone because of that kind of thing. In addition to the things that can be said online, even just for commenting and how it makes you a target. And I talk with women in politics and those out of politics in the community who are considering entering, and it's something that they think about. I think about it in terms of, because we absolutely need more women in politics, but how do we arm women to be prepared for that? Not because I want them to be desensitized to it, which unfortunately I think happens to a lot of us in some ways, but because I want them to know about it just as, unfortunately, a part of life right now. And so how they can defend themselves and prepare themselves.
So I think you have to look at this issue in the short term and the long term. And I say that because I think like things like how well are you dealing with this, like your own the person that's being attacked on social media can feel the pain. Doesn't show, but you can still carry it,
yeah,
right?
You carry it.
You carry it. So you have, I think the first, for me, advice that I actually gave a couple of the recipients today was to reach out and talk to a family member, a friend, someone you trust, and to share your what you're going through. I think that's really important. And there, we're trying to build a toolbox, we call it, by having these symposiums across the country, and hopefully in my final end of my mandate, I'll be able to have something to say these are things that we've found across the country that people think they're important. The other one, this longer term one, is I think as parents, as grandparents, and great grandparents, which I am, I think we need to teach our children what that is, what social media is about, because it has its good sides. That's how I communicate with my family up north, because it's so expensive any other way. But to also start them when they're very young about how they use their iPads and everything like that, because not all parents do that. A lot of parents just give them to their kids.
Yeah.
And to be able to teach them that there are limited periods of time where they can, they have a box where they can pull out their games or whatever and then you're teaching your kids through family and friends how important this all is and what you have to look for that isn't going to be good for you. And for them to have that knowledge early on in their life is I think one of the ways that we can help change how our kids, especially young women and young girls, react to a lot of online abuse.
Well, and I also think as the mom of two young sons, right? I think of my job, not only to make sure they go to bed on time, right? And have, eat something and something nutritious. It's also about, creating allies, feminist allies, also good partners for whoever it is, if they choose to be with someone in their older years. But also to understand what is and isn't appropriate, in the same way that you wouldn't, you talk to someone in person, but how that behavior also applies into what you say online and what you share online, right? Because that lives on. So being respectful behavior doesn't only extend to in person, but also online as well. And I think that's a gap in terms of,
I'd like to see our debating practices come back that are respectful, because I remember when I was a young person, we used to be able to debate issues and come to, like in my own community up north, the Inuit communities, is to be able to be in a room. You don't have to agree, but be respectful.
Right.
And I think, as Canadians, we're I guess our image is kind of that we're these type of Canadians.
Yes.
But now things are changing around us.
It's difficult right now.
But I think I'd really like to see young people try and get back to that practice where they can look across from each other and I don't agree with you, but this is what I think, and be able to get to a resolution of the issue and move on.
Well, and I think that's really important because, we have to live with each other, right? We're each other's neighbors. And that ability to, I think we always, even with the people we most vehemently disagree with, we always have more in common than not,
Yes,
right?
yes.
When we talk about shared values. Um, but that ability to disagree, um, yeah, that's something that I think about a lot, and I try to instill in conversations that I have.
Hmm.
Because, as much as I wish maybe you and I were able to, take care of some of the world's very serious problems right now, it's not going to, unfortunately, you have more power maybe than I do that. But, those problems aren't going to be solved online. Right.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So,
So there's lots to do.
mhm,
But I'm really just seeing the recipients today. I'm very inspired by the level of involvement these
mhm,
women have across the country,
mhm.
and they're making lots of activities and come to conclusions that eventually get into sort of the public eye, or
Yeah.
so I think especially the women that, well, they're all very unique in their own way.
Yeah.
And the medical field is another area that's very
Well, there
fraught with difficulties.
Yeah, there was a recipient today whose daughter was in the audience, and I
Yes.
looked at her during the ceremony when her mom was receiving her award, and that was actually the most emotional that I got
Mhm.
because seeing her, that little girl, right? And seeing her mom in that position, right? And that little girl is, how this moment might, shape
Yeah,
her life,
sure.
and her potential in shaping and changing Canada. It gives me great optimism
Yes.
that Canada will continue to grow and thrive, and hopefully continue to be a place where we can have respectful conversations even if we don't always agree.
I agree. My dream is to have our younger generation that are in school now learning about the history of the country in a way that will help them understand
Mm,
not only what happened, but what do we do to heal that process.
yeah,
I think that children need to know these things, and they need to learn, and they carry that into their adult life,
yeah,
and they use that knowledge as a way of coming to a place where they can make decisions like
yeah.
leaders. We need leaders that are strong,
Hmm.
and are able to fight those battles,
Well,
not literally,
yeah,
not
not literally, of course. I can even think about myself having been a product of the BC education system, and I know a lot of things now that I didn't know, that I wasn't taught, about residential school,
yeah,
about the internment of Japanese Canadians, about really stains in Canada's history. And I think that now that I know, right, and I have children of myself, and it's not that I unfortunately can't go back in time and right those wrongs,
no,
but I can make sure that I have the conversations with my kids that I didn't have myself.
that is so important.
It's fundamental, I think. And it's not coming from a place of shame. It's coming from a place of just education,
Sure.
openness,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's it.
And bringing people along. Because I think there's such a pushback right now to, well, we can't talk about those things because we're going to make someone feel bad about it. It's like, that's just pretending that something didn't happen. That's a continuation of, where we've been. And that doesn't help us get any further.
No, and I think the silence makes people
Right.
feel bad
Yeah.
as well,
Mhm.
so there has to be, I think, a way of talking about these issues without, like you said, no shame. It happened. We can't turn the clock back, but we can understand each other
Yeah.
and work together to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe if just to wrap up, maybe you could share if you could share one, something to anyone listening who is a woman who's interested in pursuing opportunities to serve the public in different ways, what would you say to them?
First and foremost, I think we begin with ourselves, feeling good about ourselves, that we are taking care of ourselves, both mentally and physically. And that allows us to be a much kind of stronger individual. And then finding ways to get involved into a public position. It could be politics, it could be a number of different places across the country. And being able to, if you see something that isn't right, to be able to speak to it.
Mm.
If you ignore it, it grows. If it's about you as a woman, being a woman, I'm not talking about social media, but just in the interactions that happen. But because I went through that, I went through face-to-face interactions in terms of abuse, like verbal abuse, because I was a woman. But I learned that if somebody does that, I speak right back with them, not in the same tone or in the same thing, but just reminding them that what we've just had is not all right, you know, and just, I think, stay focused. There'll always be all this stuff going around you. So what's important also is to stay focused on what your objective is, on what your future, like the way you would like to see things happen, and work from that perspective. I think will give you the strength. Social media is more difficult, but I think a lot of times it's better not to even have that social media if you're in public life. Because I shut the comment sections from our platforms because it was not only hurting me. I've been in this work for 50 some years. So, but it's still, I still felt it, but my family was affected. And then the people in the office that
were reading it
and actually looking at these comments, because they're in the communications area, people are being impacted by this. So made the decision to keep our platforms because they're important, but shut the comments off, because people can get in touch with us. Like people were saying, well, we're not going to be able to get in touch with you, but we have email, we have phones, we have regular mail.
Right.
We have
other ways.
There are other ways.
Yeah.
If that kind of behavior is making your life difficult, then I think it's better not just walk away from it,
right?
But take a stand. Like, I'm not doing comments anymore. That's taking a stand.
Yeah.
Well,
and even personally on my social media, I will wade in and I will tell people that what they're saying is inappropriate and that this is their first and last warning. And that being in that space is a privilege and not a right. So, however that looks for different people in managing it, we have to push back, right? It's just simply not acceptable. Yeah. So thank you so much for spending some time with me. It's an absolute honor to meet you. I never in my wildest dreams, I think I'm getting old. As a child, I never imagined having this experience. Thank you.
I never thought I'd be the Governor General. So that makes two of us.
That makes two of us. So thank you so much. Thank you.